The magic that happens when you focus on the music and everything else is what it is. We don't care about the other stuff, your dress, the color of your skin, the color of your hair, none of that. Like, let's just learn how to play great music together. That's really what School of Rock is.
All right, I think you're going to love this week's interview. We have Stacy Ryan, who is the COO of School of Rock. You probably even want to watch this episode on our Second in Command podcast YouTube channel. Stacy has been building the School of Rock globally. She joined, they had 16 corporate locations. They now have 40 corporate locations. They have 353 locations worldwide, operating in 15 countries. This is a education system where they teach kids and adults, their oldest clients about 85 years old, how to play instruments, how to play in a rock band, how to play music together. But they also do a massive amount of work around mental health and helping people reconnect with themselves. It's not why people join, it's not what they sell, but that's the impact they have on the world. She's also going to talk about women in the C-suite and women and how they need to lean in and be stronger as executives. You'll love the episode. Lots of great lessons in here, and I had fun recording it. We'll see you on the inside, and this might even be one you'll want to share with your list as well. So Stacy, welcome to the Second in Command podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Cameron.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a while now. I was sitting at a dinner in Canada about 10 years ago, and I was having dinner with a woman who was one of the Canadian, like the MTV. She was our Much Music video jockeys back in the day of Much Music videos. Her name was Erica M. And Erica was part of, or I think her husband might have been part of the School of Rock in Canada in some way. And I was like, what's the School of Rock? Is this where like people go and learn how to be musicians or something? And she's like, no. And she started telling me about it. And I was pretty fascinated with it. It was a really cool business and a really cool brand, but it had a really cool cause and a purpose. And I don't know whether I was the last person to hear about it or the first person to hear about it, but I would imagine there's lots of others out there that don't know what School of Rock is. So why don't we start off with, talk to us about what is School of Rock? What have you two been building, or you've been building for the last 8 years? What's your core purpose as an organization, et cetera?
Not everybody does know about School of Rock, and everybody needs to know about School of Rock. My almost 9 years here with the organization, it's gone from a School of Rock like the movie to now it's like, oh yes, School of Rock, I know someone who goes or my child goes. So School of Rock is, the most revolutionary music education program in the world. So what we do is we teach kids how to play musical instruments by putting them in bands and on stages. So we start with the song first approach. The theory comes in afterwards. There's a, commitment to your bandmates to practice, to learn your songs. There's a social component to it. We have one of the most passionate communities I have ever been a part of, and I'm honored to be a part of it. And, the magic that happens when you focus on the music and everything else is what it is. We don't care about the other stuff, your dress, the color of your skin, the color of your hair, none of that. Like, let's just learn how to play great music together. That's really what School of Rock is. So today we are 353 schools worldwide, 15 countries. We're not close to done yet. So we currently serve over 60,000 students worldwide and are excited to keep the growth coming.
It's extraordinary. So are you a franchise model? Are you a license? Is it all corporate locations? Can you walk us through some of the model?
We today own and operate 47 locations, all within domestic US. When I came, we owned and operated 16. We are true believers in our concept. We like to acquire strong schools, great schools, and to influence. And then the remaining schools worldwide are all franchised.
Okay, how does your franchise work? Is there a franchise fee, a royalty? I've built 3 franchise organizations over the years, one in the very boring industry of house painting, College Pro Painters, one in the very boring industry of automotive repair. It was called Gerber Auto Collision in the US and Boyd Auto Body in Canada. And then one in the worst industry possible, garbage, where we did 1-800-GOT-JUNK. You get a sexy business. You're doing like rock and roll. I mean, holy shit. Like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, you at least franchise
only the rock and roll, Cameron. We don't want the sex and the drugs.
Yeah, you franchise the legal part of the cool stuff, right? So
exactly.
Yeah, how's your franchise model work?
Yeah, so it is a franchise fee. of about $50,000, just under. And that gives you the rights to own and operate a School of Rock location within a targeted territory. So, with that, you're able to market, to play, and to own and operate that school. And it will be the only school within that territory with the purchase.
And what's a territory? Is it like a DMA? Is it a city, a metro? What's how big are your territories?
Yeah, that'll vary, Cameron. We typically will look at drive time. We'll look at natural barriers like rivers, bridges,
Yep.
highways. We have a very sophisticated system that we use, Sims that you may be familiar with, that helps us identify what is the territory, what are the demographics within it, and then local information also, local knowledge from people will go out and will drive territories and ensure that they make sense. So every territory will be a little bit differently. Size wise, a territory in Arkansas is slightly larger than the territory in, New
Sure.
York City. So it'll vary on a couple of components.
It's funny, I remember cutting territories for College Pro painters back in 1993, 30 years ago in Seattle, and I had these massive, massive maps that I lay out on the kitchen table, and I was color coding them with highlighters. And then years later, we were doing 1-800 Got Junk, and I was cutting territories, and I did Washington, D.C., and my franchisee in Washington started laughing to me. He goes, this territory makes no sense. And I said, why? I mean, you got a couple zip codes on one side of the river and a couple zip codes on the other side of the river. And he goes, there's no bridge. I'm like, well, it shows there's a bridge. He goes, yeah, it's a train bridge. It's not a car bridge. You can't drive. He goes, you got to go 10 miles south to go across. I'm like, I had no idea. Yeah, cutting a territory is not as simple as it sounds.
Yeah, luckily for me, we have an incredible franchise development team
Mm.
that is incredibly knowledgeable in this area and use the sophistication of all of those combined resources to cut the territories in a way that makes sense.
Now you mentioned that is it only for kids or are there adults that are in School of Rock as well? And
Yeah, so I think our oldest student right now, I believe, is late 80s.
wow,
I
awesome.
could be wrong, but we have a very strong adult program also, especially down in South America and our schools
Mm.
down in Brazil and in Chile. They have a very strong adult program, but we offer the same thing. Adults come in and they, pick their instrument that they want to learn, and we put them in a band with other adults, and they're going out and doing gigs and performing. So it's the exact same program, but geared towards adults. So we go anywhere from, preschool age up and through adulthood.
That's amazing. All right. So going from 16 locations to 353 locations over the last 8 years, I can't imagine that the growth has been easy the whole time. So what have been some of the lessons from the edge or what were some of the tough moments that you went through and how did you learn from them as a company?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I came into School of Rock, we were about 80 total locations and 16 of them were company owned.
Okay.
Within that growth, focusing specifically on the company owned growth, well, actually, both sides of it. I mean, Cameron, it was really just looking at the team and the support and reevaluating it. So, I have led a couple of reorgs within School of Rock now, specifically when I had taken over franchise operations. I was already running company school operations and merging those two together into one team. Previously, there had been just a separate team for company schools, a separate team for franchise schools.
Mm.
So there was this common misperception of what are you doing in your company schools that you're not telling us franchise owners? And, there was just a level of mistrust. And there was also just, opportunity where the right hand maybe didn't know what the left hand was saying.
Mm.
And, our goal is to drive success in all of our locations, whether they're corporate owned or franchise owned. So when I was asked to take over the franchise operations, it was really important to me to find a way to blend those two teams into one, to have that one single voice approach. And what it allowed us to do is, as a team, give comfort to our franchisees that they knew whatever we were doing or advising that company owned school in their next town over, we were giving them the same stuff, the same resources, the same communications, the same templates, the same approach, same advice. That was one of the first things. And we structured it in a way that it was just one voice over that entire territory. So for the Northeast, it was one person that ran our company locations and consulted with our franchisees. What happened is, as we grew, bandwidth became an issue. on both sides. Company owned locations take a lot more time and dedication. Company school, if we lose the manager, likely one of my team members have to go and sit at the desk and make sure that the school is running well. Where in a franchise situation, if they lose a manager, it's like, okay, well, here's some tactics you can try, that may be helpful. But we're not going and filling in. So it's a different level of support.
Hmm.
So as we started seeing that bandwidth was an issue, what we did is created an additional role, focuses specifically on the company school operations, but still reports up to our director of operations. So we still have that same one voice approach, but now with the appropriate amount of bandwidth. Anytime you're in an organization and you see the growth like we have, the most important thing is to look in the mirror and assess and say, okay, where are we falling short? Where can we be better? I am blessed to have an incredibly committed team. There's 19 people on my team, and all but one started in a school of rock themselves, as a general manager or a music director. And the only one that did not was on my team at my last organization. And as soon as I was in a position to build a team, he was the first person that I went and recruited and said, hey, you need to come here with me. So it's been, several years now that he's been at School of Rock. But what it's allowed us to do is create this amazing career path. But there's also like 200 years of School of Rock history on the operations team. So when I first came in, often I would hear the phrase like, why do we do it this way? And it's like, well, we've always done it this way. We worked really hard on changing our mindset and instilling a rule. Like, we can never say that. That can never be our answer. If the question is, why do we do it that way? And we don't know why, other than because we've always done it that way. The answer is like, you know what? I'm not really sure. And that's going to be our trigger to look at it and reevaluate and say, okay, is there a better way that we can be doing this? Let's strip it down
It's
and let's
interesting.
rebuild. And that's what a lot of the team here did, the leadership team as a whole. We stripped a lot of things down and rebuilt School of Rock so that we now have a foundation that we are prepared to grow on for, many, many years to come.
It's interesting. I remember when my children were young. I've got two boys that are now 22 and 20. And I remember when they were 3 and 1, 4 and 2, it was why? Like, I would give them the answer, but why? And then I give them the next answer, why? And I think leadership teams do need to examine that because we've always done it that way. Well, why? Why did we start it back then? And why haven't we changed it now? And why is it still working? And why haven't we iterated? It's also interesting you pointed out, and I don't understand why franchisees feel like we wouldn't tell them the absolute best systems out of greed alone. That if we give them the best systems, they're going to produce more, which means we make more royalties and they're going to be happier and they're going to validate more. Like, we're not going to keep the good stuff from you. If anything, we're going to try to force feed you with the good stuff, right? It's very hard at times to manage the franchisee relationship because we can't fire them like we can fire an underperforming employee. So what are some of the lessons that you've learned in leadership from working with some of the harder to work with franchise partners, some of the underperforming franchise partners, some of the troublesome franchise partners, the ones you can't fire? Have you learned anything from them that have made you a better leader with employees?
Absolutely. And, to your previous point, like, why do franchisees not automatically assume that we have their best interest in mind? I've found that franchising is this incredible, very delicate scale of, authority and partnership.
Hmm.
And, as a franchisor, there's authority in regards to, okay, you have to submit your P&L. You have to have, this image on your walls. Like, these are the things you have to do. But there's also that partnership that these are entrepreneurs and they
Right.
want to, express themselves and do their own things as well. So it's finding this very delicate balance and ensuring that scale always stays balanced. And if something happens to tip it in one direction, you have to then do something to counteract it back in the other way to maintain the strength in that relationship and the power in it. There is an article, it's the 6 stages of franchise.
It was
You may be familiar.
Greg Nathan from Australia. It's
Yes,
fantastic.
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that. It's one of the first things I send to anyone who is stepping into a franchising management advisory role.
Yeah.
You need to understand this. And I think that was a real game changer for me, because I encourage my team and myself also that when there is a disagreement, when something is happening, to say, okay, well, what phase are they in? If I look at this, where are they? Because that can and should adjust the way that you approach the conversation and the problem solving. We have learned a lot with School of Rock. 7 years ago was a very different organization, where there was some turmoil, from the system to the franchisor, and that has completely reversed. That there is, very healthy partnership, and that's been a lot of work. Rob, the CEO, and myself went on a full listening campaign. Like, just tell us everything, that we could be doing better. And I think the most important thing is remembering that these are business people, these are entrepreneurs, these are our partners. One of the biggest, most important rules at School of Rock is we are never allowed to speak disparagingly of a franchisee. So, if someone is going at something, I can't say, hey, they're being a real pain in the ass.
Right.
What I can say is, hey, they're really incredibly passionate about this topic right now. And, we need to give it more attention.
Right.
But changing that whole approach, that whole mentality, because we need each other. Our success is their success, their failure is our failure. It goes in both
Yeah,
directions.
you had a very similar approach. We used to call ours franchise partners instead of franchisees because we wanted to think, and we thought of our customer as our joint customer. They weren't our franchise partner wasn't our customer, they were our partner, and the end user was our joint customer. And then, yeah, we also kind of recognized as well that that 6 stages of franchising talks about the natural evolution of a franchisee, much like the evolution of a human. Like when we're teenagers, we all think our parents are idiots. And then once we move out of the house and we have kids of our own, we recognize our parents were just trying their best and we kind of have some new respect for them, right? Weird how it all just happens. We even taught our franchise partners the 6 stages of franchising model. We gave them the article. We made sure they understood it so that when they were pissed off or frustrated or starting to come around, when they were moving from the glee stage to the fee stage, et cetera, they understood it. It made sense to them. It's cool that you're going through that. How about the international franchise partners and the international employees? I mean, it's interesting to have a perspective of operating, I think you said, in 13 or 15 countries. That's very different too. Working with a group in, Brazil and a group in Canada, they're very, very different. Can you walk us through some of the lessons that you've learned around business and leadership that's more global?
Yeah, absolutely. What we have learned is that we are not great at owning and operating international locations. So a few years back, we actually changed our model, and we have master franchise organizations. So there is a master franchise team who owns and operates, Brazil, Spain, and Portugal. We have another owner who owns and operates all of Latam minus Brazil. So he has Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Peru. And basically, those are the experts in those areas, right? They know the local laws, the cultures, the type of community that it is, all those regional specific nuances that will make or break a business.
Hmm.
When you're in that area, you understand it better. You have the language better, the culture. So we operate through that, through our master franchisees. And with that, their franchisees become our sub franchisees. So we're all still connected under the same umbrella, but our franchisees in Chile, in Brazil, have the benefit to an entire dedicated team in their area that is translating things. We push things out, the Brazil team translates it to Portuguese. They make everything that in a way is regionally appropriate, instead of just US pushing things out and expecting all these other countries to operate as if the US does in the
Hmm.
same manner. So the international directs that we own are limited right now to Canada, Australia. We have one school in Philippines. Um, and then we have a school in Ireland who is actually a owner here in US as well. But for the most part, our goal is to continue with that growth because it's been incredibly successful. I actually just got back from visiting many of our schools down in Brazil, and it's incredible to see. It's like the version of the School of Rock corporate office here down there, and how dedicated their team is, and out on the road and with their franchisees, and also, running their company owned schools. So it's the same model, but it's more effective.
Does anything change with the School of Rock as music has started to change? I mean, I was at a 3-day music festival this weekend, and there was not a single rock band or instrument on the stage. Yeah, there was. Somebody played guitar, but there was a DJ that was the front man. Does your model change or iterate now that music is so different than what it was when, I don't know, 30 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, it'll always change, but we always stick to that core of, we're School of Rock, but we're not limited to rock and roll. However, we have 60 core shows that we have created that will focus on, the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. And, there's some that are focused on jazz and, all different genres of music. And we choose these shows and the songs within those shows specifically because of the educational value within them as well. So as they're learning how to play these songs, as they're learning how to play these chords, we're able to then connect it to that music theory concept that is embedded in that song. And that's how we back into the uncool stuff of rock and roll. Now, with that said, our schools are not required to only run those core shows. Most of our schools will have a good mix. So our school in Seattle typically has, heavier grunge shows.
I used to live, I lived in Seattle in 1993. I was there. I watched Nirvana. I watched Red Hot Chili Peppers. I was like right in the middle of the grunge. I lived 2 blocks away from Kurt Cobain. It was
Oh, it's
amazing.
amazing.
Loved
That's
it.
amazing. Yeah, and our schools down in South America or out in Europe, they'll play, some songs specific to their region also. So,
Yeah,
we have all that flexibility. We actually have a Taylor Swift camp that's being tested in one of our schools this year. So
that's
we're
great.
all like watching, we're like curious how this one's gonna go. It may sell out completely as
That's
soon
really
as it
cool.
goes for sale. But we're always looking for, what are the kids interested in? Where is the educational value in it? And finding the perfect blend of
Yeah,
both.
and I don't think it's a death nail to your model at all for the next 50 years. Like, I think kids are still super interested in rock and in music and in instruments for sure. I took my kids to a Who concert 2 years ago in Vancouver, and they played on stage with the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra. There was a 67-page symphony orchestra playing with the Who, and I was like, whoa, mind blown. It was spectacular. All right, I want to flip the script a little bit. You are not rare. We've got what's called the COO Alliance. So we have a network of second in commands from 17 countries that are members of the COO Alliance. 38% of our members are women, which is pretty good considering I think probably 45% from US and Canada are women, but 35% or 38 global. But you're playing a senior role, an executive, a COO role, and it's not that normal for women to be in the C-suite, or it wasn't. I mean, I think the most well-known second in command ever is Sheryl Sandberg, who is the COO of Facebook. So certainly, you're there. But what are some of the idiosyncrasies that women face, or some of the struggles that women face in the C-suite? And are they not disappearing? Are they getting better?
I know it's getting better, Cameron, because I watch the numbers quite closely. It's just moving very slowly. So last year, it was 26% of C-suite roles in US were held by women. As of, last month, it's 28%. So we're still very far off. And it's interesting because men and women join the workforce at the same rate. But it's when it reaches that point of senior leadership of VP level that there's just a drop off. And, for every 10 men who are promoted, it's only 7 women. And then the gap gets wider and wider and wider. It is improving. And there's been incredible, people in these seats like Cheryl, who, I've read that book so many times. I've gifted that book to so many different women, but it is a struggle. Women have to find this balance between, being assertive, but not aggressive, and, being compassionate, but not emotional. There's these tags that are put on women that are just different with the same action of a man. In a meeting, a woman is 3 times more likely to be interrupted. So, it's finding that balance of, hey, may I finish my sentence, but not being the bitch in the room at the
Right.
same time because
Yeah.
I'm the woman. So Throughout my career, I have many times, more times than I can count, sat at a boardroom table and have counted the people around the table. And it's typically along the lines of three women. One is there taking notes, and the rest of them are white men around the table. And, it's easy to feel like you don't belong. And it's easy to get intimidated in those situations. And that's where, Cheryl's statement of lean in, take up your space, remember you're in that room because you belong in it. So, for me personally, I've fought very hard in corporate America. It's tough for women in the music industry. It's even tougher. And the numbers are even worse. When I was awarded the COO role, a few years back, I felt a increased level of responsibility to play my role for the women coming up after me. And, the young girls who are starting off their education now and looking for these role models for them to look up to. So with that in mind, myself and a colleague, we launched a group called Front Women. You could visit it at frontwomen.org. It's something we're incredibly proud of. And it's just a community resource group. And, quarterly we send out newsletters where we will interview just some incredible powerhouse women in every industry and just ask them some of the questions. What was most challenging for you? What did you learn? What's your favorite book and resource? And then we also do quarterly meetings where we all get together and we talk through things like how to acknowledge microaggressions, how to battle those, how to bring in more allies after the Me Too movement. So it's all about empowering each other, working together, learning with each other. And, I'm really proud to say that there's men and women who join those meetings. And the conversations, I always walk away from them feeling so inspired because no matter how much preparation and research I do for these calls, I'm always learning more just in the conversations and hearing it. And a lot of it is just knowing that you're not alone. It's not something we're going to ignore. We're going to continue to push and break the barriers because, all of the little girls coming up behind us, they deserve a path with less hurdles and less, bumps than I had to endure. And, although it's a slow grow, we're moving in the right direction and we're going to keep pushing.
Great. I'm glad you're doing the work. I was the only male in a room of 400 women. I was invited in to speak to a group of women executives in Canada around 10 years ago, and I was supposed to give the male perspective on women in the workforce, and it was at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I think the first thing I said was, I'm kind of right now. Like, if I say exactly what I feel, I'm f***ed, and if I don't say exactly what I feel, you're going to give me shit for sugarcoating it all. Does anybody have a bottle of scotch? I need a drink, because I know it's only 10 a.m., but I just want to chug a couple of drinks. And then I was the only male to address the 400 female franchisees from McDonald's. And so I got to do the same talk. And I felt very privileged. And after that, I ended up being invited to the TED Women Conference. And I was one of 50 men in a room of 750 women. There was only 50 of us there. And I went to it twice. It was really profoundly impactful. I'm curious, what is your thought around one of the many reasons why it's happening is that women tend to drop out of the workforce at 30s, mid 30s for 5 to 15 years to have kids. Is that part of the reason why it's not 50-50? Because they're just not there when the men are moving from director to VP to C-level, the women tend to be at home. At least my wife was. She dropped out and went home and raised our two kids. And then when she came back to work, they're not going to take somebody who's been out of the workforce just because she's the same age as me and plug me in at the COO. Is that one of the reasons why it happens? And if so, does that make it more like 60-40 is the bar that we're shooting for, or am I completely out to lunch?
No, I mean that could be one of the causes of it, but I think one of the things to remember is when women are going for promotions, when they're being interviewed, when even just in conversations. I mean, I'm sure if we compared notes of how many times you were asked if you plan to have children versus how many times I was asked
Yeah.
if I plan to have children, it would be vastly different.
Well, and it's worse in Canada. In Canada, women get 12 months maternity leave and the company has to hold the role for them. So there's a massive bias against that. In the US, what's mat leave in the US? Is it 3 months or 6 weeks?
I think it varies so greatly from one organization to another, but I don't know what the average is. But I know that it's nowhere near what
Yeah.
other countries are doing in the US.
I've definitely felt the bias. I mean, I've definitely felt sitting there and interviewing somebody and going, God, I love them, but I hope they don't leave to go have kids next year or in 3 years. But I would
Would
also
you ever
hire a
think that of a man?
no, exactly. But I would definitely, I would also at the same time, only because I think women are just better as executives and managers and leaders than men are. They multitask better. They are better at communication. They are better at managing conflict. They are more inclusive. I just think they're actually better. I think they write better, think better. Like, glad you're doing the work. I think it's very important. And after all, it is 2023. I mean, it's time to get our shit together, right?
Time to get our shit together. It
Yeah.
really is. Especially, I said 28% of women in C-suite roles, it's 6% women of color. I
Yeah.
mean, when you start to really dig it down, and
No,
the diversity is just
that's a massive problem as well. Like women of color and people of color, like it's just so blatantly obvious at that point that that is a big problem. You said something, and I think it was before we went live, that I want to go back and ask you about. And before I forget, what instrument do you play?
I play the keyboard on my laptop, Cameron.
I knew it. Something in my gut was like, and you don't play an instrument.
So I have a keyboard. I
Do
have a
you?
beautiful guitar. I can play
Okay.
very little on both.
Yeah.
And the worst part of this is every other year we do our international convention. All franchisee staff from all over the world come in, and our most favorite night of convention is our
Air guitar.
jam night. So
Nice.
we rent out a top class, huge venue. We bring in food, backline to the nine, and we
Yeah.
just jam for hours. So owners, staff members, corporate team members all get on. And
Oh.
one year franchisee dragged me on, and I will tell you, I played a mean tambourine that year, like very mean. I
The
was really good at
cowbell.
it. So every year, it wasn't a
Cowbell.
cowbell, it was a tambourine. I had the whole shake going and all.
That's great.
And every year myself and another franchisee who also doesn't play, we say, next time we're getting on stage, we're starting lessons next week. And I started lessons during COVID, and then travel
Good.
picked up again.
Mm.
And I became that customer that had 6 classes I'd missed and needed to make up. I was being charged again for the new month. I wasn't making my classes. And finally I had to say, all right, I'm going to come back. And I'm waiting for one to open in my town. So it's a
Okay.
little.
Well, so here's my message to every mom and dad and every new mom and dad coming up. Don't get your kids into piano lessons when they're young. It takes too long to get competent, and it's so freaking frustrating. And you can't pick up your piano and take it to college, and you can't take it to your summer home, or you like teach them to play guitar. Because guitar, you can actually get reasonably competent as a kid within 2 or 3 months that you feel good about yourself. And then once you've played it for 6, 7 years, you can take your guitar everywhere with you. My parents had me in piano lessons for 4 years, and I can't play. And I'm so frustrated. But I'm with you. I started taking guitar lessons, then I started traveling. It is absolutely on the top of my list to go learn it.
Well, we will have you playing a song in one class. All we need is 30 minutes with you, and whatever your instrument of choice is, we will have you playing a song by the end of that
Then
class.
I will be guitar. Here's the question I want to ask about. You said something about the mental health aspect of School of Rock. Walk me through that. What is that? Is that kind of like equine therapy when you get kids working with horses? What is the mental health aspect of the School of Rock? I'm super intrigued.
I alluded to this before, all we care about is the music. We don't care about your pronoun association, your gender, your skin color, your hair color, the clothes that you wear. All we want to do is play great music and have fun together, and everything else doesn't matter. So School of Rock with that has become the place and the home for kids that felt like they didn't necessarily fit in anywhere else. Because at School of Rock, they can truly be whoever they are, and we celebrate that on every single level. We say that we sell music education, but what we actually provide is increased self-confidence, help with depression and with suicidal ideations, and creating this sense of belonging and
Mm.
this place where it's just safe and comfortable and fun. All of a sudden, having this whole crew of friends when you didn't really think you would ever have friends. And in my 9 years here, I've collected thousands of stories. I've had so many parents come up to me and say, you've saved my child's life. Thank you. Before School of Rock, they wouldn't pick up their head. They would only look at the ground, and all of a sudden now they're on stage and doing a ripping guitar solo, or belting and singing and leading the whole crew. And it's these transformations are real and last a lifetime. I've spent my entire life and my career in youth enrichment, in education, and actually came to School of Rock as a consultant with no intention of staying. Had to convince myself, all right, it's music education, but it's still education. You're still enriching children's lives. And very quickly I learned that it was by far the most profound impact that I was having on enriching children's lives,
It's
and
amazing.
decided to stay long term, and came in with no intention of staying and now have no intention of leaving. So
It's amazing. I heard a saying years ago, and it was, you sell them what they want, you give them what they need. And it's like,
that's
we're going to sell you on learning a musical instrument and learning about music, but that's not what you're here for. And we're not going to tell you what you're here for because you wouldn't join. But
right.
you're making happier, more connected people who are, it's like the butterfly effect. You're tilting the universe.
Yeah, and we are proud partners with the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide.
Mm,
And, more than anything, we work to eliminate that stigma that you can't talk about it, that it's not okay to not be okay. We want people to feel comfortable. We want our students to know that it is okay to feel sad some days. And here's some tactics that could help you get through it. And here's some trusted adults that you can speak to help you navigate through it. And it is the mental health crisis amongst youth is by far,
yeah,
it's scary right now. And
especially post-COVID.
especially post COVID. And for us, COVID wasn't the first pandemic that we encountered. The mental health crisis in youth was. And then since COVID, that only made it worse.
All right, I want you to go back to the 21, 22-year-old Stacy Ryan and give yourself some advice. And it can't be go do your guitar lesson. What advice, what advice would you give the younger you that you know to be true today?
I think about that a lot because I talk about it a lot with other women, earlier on in their career where I was. And my advice to myself would be to keep pushing and to believe in yourself. As a woman, early on in my career, I was given the advice to pull back my hair and put on lipstick, and that would help me be more effective in selling programs to parents. And those types of things make you stop and question, like, I don't like wearing lipstick. Do I need to wear lipstick to be successful professionally? So I think the most important thing is listening to your gut and staying true to who you are. I left an organization because it was molding me to be a manager that I wasn't proud of when I looked in the mirror. So I took a really scary leap and left. I left with no other job prospect on the horizon. I just said, this is not what I want to be in my career and in my life. And it was the best decision I ever made. And it, led me to my next organization, which brought me here to School of Rock. So I think the most important thing is be true to you, know who you want to be and how you want to lead, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise or influence you otherwise.
I love that. Stacy Ryan, the COO at School of Rock. Stacy, thank you for scaling it and growing with us and sharing with us today on the Second in Command podcast. I really appreciate the time today.
That's really what we're trying to do at Parakeeto, is trying to equip digital agencies is what we focus on. The framework and the technology and everything that we've built, we believe applies to almost any service business. So, you could apply to professional services, but we're a small company. So the niche that we were born into was in the digital agency space. And